Hi class. So for our first meeting on our community engagement, solidarity, and citizenship class, we'll be talking about why should we study community, or in its simplest form, what is community? So our objectives for this meeting is first, understand the importance of community dynamics and community action, as well as the definitions and um, etymology of community or the word community itself. So, mga sample na images dito, ano, MCL community, GK, Gawad Kalinga community, community, uh, coastal community, rather. Then, a typical community somewhere in the metro. Usually, karamihan dito is mga informal settlers, okay? But regardless if they are formal or informal, illegal or legal, the idea is they are all part of a community. And in the case of MCL, ito, hopefully familiar sa inyo itong imahe na to, or familiar pa sa inyo. Since hindi ko sure kung kailan yung last time na nakadaan kayo dito sa lugar na to. Kung natatandaan niyo pa ba na may Jollibee dyan, na may traffic dyan, yeah. Buti na lang sa street view, walang traffic, no? At least nakita niyo ulit na walang traffic dito sa pulo. Kung di man kayo nakakadaan ulit. Kahit ako, ang tagal na last time. March yung last time. Yung last meeting sa MCL. Yun yung last time na ako pulo. So, what is a community? Since ancient Greek philosophy or ancient Greek times, the view of community has evolved and changed with the evolution of human interactions and behaviors. Key or important or fundamental concept that we should understand when we talk about community is that community can be equated sa community can always or will always be equated sa tao. At the very core of a community, laging merong tao dyan. So, according to Aristotle, he described community as a compound of parts having functions and interests in common. Take note, his definition does not have the word people in it, yet it focuses on some having parts and functions and interests that are basically moving together, functioning together to create a certain sense of interaction. Kung bakit hindi niya ginamit particularly yung word na people, kasi in ancient Greece, the closest example of what a community is ay yung yung tinatawag natin Agora. So Agora in ancient Greek cities is an open space that serves as meeting ground for various activities of the citizens. So the name, first found in the works of Homer, connotes both assembly of the people as well as a physical setting. So kung babalikan natin yung definition ni Aristotle, that a community is a compound of parts having functions and interests in common, the idea of an agora as a clear example of a community states that sa agora, kung makikita niyo dito sa larawan na to, kitang-kita niyo na may iba't ibang mga building. And every building or every part of that community or agora has certain specific functions. Dito, yung Coliseum for theater. Dito, yung, hindi magkakamali, temple. Then, meron din ditong marketplace as social gathering, area for social gathering. But what's important is each part of an agora has a certain function and interest, and those are compounded into that particular physical setting with people behaving or acting certain actions or behavior or function within that particular setting. So, kung in simplest terms, kung babalikan natin or babasahin natin yung gustong iparating ni Aristotle, parang the thing is, when it comes to community, dapat it's very much not about the people, but what's actually happening within that particular setting. In this case, really, the typical feature of their life includes religious, political, judicial, social, and even commercial activity, because in its clear definition, agora is mostly connected with the word marketplace, okay? Marketplace, economic or financial activity. But in its broadest sense, kabilang lahat ng function. But to simplify it again, agora basically focuses on more than just the people, but every function of the parts within that particular community. Moving on, however, like most concepts in the social sciences, the word is used a lot with varying meanings. Hindi naman natin ginagamit yung agora. I think most of you, ngayon lang narinig yung agora, hindi naman yun yung exact na gagamitin nating example when it comes to community. Siguro kung tatanungin ko kayo kung ano yung community para sa inyo, some of you will have a varying, how to call this, meanings. Because similar to an art, it's quite abstract. Hindi clear. May variations, may kanya-kanyang interpretations yung definition ng community. Also, it's theoretical in a way that it can be rationally contemplative. Pwede kang magsawa ng pag-aaral, research, na magsasabi na ang lugar na ito ay isang komunidad at ito ay isang hindi. Makahanap ka ng mga particular elements mula sa pag-aaral mo na magsasabi na ang lugar na ito ay isang komunidad, ang lugar na ito ay isang komunidad. At the same time, in the most philosophical sense, it focuses on the community spirit or connected community. Take note, it does not again connote in a philosophical sense about people only, but connected community or community spirit. Ibig sabihin na mas focus niya, going back again to Aristotle, is yung connection na bawat parts na nagpo-function for a particular interest or particular activity. Moving on, historically, from a sociological sense, the notion of community is usually credited to Ferdinand Tönnies. So, Tönnies compared and described modern life and proposed modern society was in transition from village to urban settings. In his popular or magnum opus, yung popular niyang book, Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft, so, or Community and Society if translated sa English. The thing with Tönnies' idea, yung conception niya ng community and its transition to a more from a community to a society, kasi yun yung gusto niya iparating sa kanyang libro. Kung mapapansin niyo yung date kanina, it was in 1957, and yun ay katatapos lang nung first and second industrial, hindi ko kakamali, revolution. Okay? First and second industrial revolutions, and what it entailed was that yung transition from the typical rural setting to an urban setting created provided changes, modified yung pamumuhay ng mga tao, yung nakagawian ng mga tao, yung organization ng mga tao, and yung kabuuan ng kanilang komunidad. Hence, his idea was that when it comes to community, for Tony's, community is represented by individuals' close social ties such as family, friends, and neighbors. For him, para matawag na isang community ay isang community, first and foremost, dapat meron tinatawag na close social ties. Ibig sabihin, mayroong connection ng bawat isa. Hindi pwedeng sa isang lugar kayo pero wala man lang kayong any certain sense of connection, social connection with one another. The mere fact siguro na binabati nyo ang isa't isa, kahit pagtango lang yan, lalo ngayon kailangan may physical distancing, means that there's a certain social connection between you. Siguro, for Tony's, we can consider that as a community. In addition, community may be defined as a practice of engaging and connecting with others. Okay. From Aristotle to Tony's, kung kay Aristotle, more on the function, fluidity, and connection, dito, nandun pa rin yung idea ng connection and function and interests, pero mas focus na yung definition sa tao. From Tony's definition onwards. So, communities, at the same time, according kay Britt, are aggregates of people who share common activities and or beliefs who are bound by together principally by relations of affect, loyalty, common values, or personal concern. In addition, community may be defined as a set of meaningful social connections in a group of any size where members have something in common. Alternatively, para kay Porter naman, a virtual community as aggregation of individuals or business partners. Kasi as we progress, community also progresses. The definition progresses from Aristotle to Ferdinand Tönnies to Britt, or rather to Porter and to Britt. So dahil yung definition naman ni Porter focuses mainly on the virtual community, something that arises during the age of information or information age nitong late 2000s. For him, which is aggregation of individuals or business partners who interact around a shared interest, where the interaction is at least partially supported or mediated by technology and guided by some practical or some protocols or norms. It's a more pragmatic definition. Kung tutusin nga din, yung definition ni Porter is sobrang pragmatic. Why? Because mostly virtual communities in the late 2000 was created for certain interest groups. Okay? Ito ay ginawa kasi may mga grupo na nagsama-sama from all parts of the internet because again, to reiterate, during those times, people connect to the internet because they have certain things that they want to explore, and the easiest way to explore the internet before was to find your certain interests. Okay, virtual forums or chat room were created na very much specific sa mga particular interests. Kaya uso dati yung mga tawag dito, Pinoy exchange for anything and everything about Filipinos. Then we have Cosmopolitan for anything about Philippine fashion and news or showbiz news. Uso yung mga ganun before because it's very much interest driven. Balikan ko pala tong kay Brit 2001 siya. For him, the definition of community is very much positive, too much positivistic. Naniniwala kasi siya dito na For a community to be considered a community, they must be bounded by relations of affect, loyalty, common values, and or personal concern. Masyadong problematic yung definition na dito. Because hindi naman lahat ng community has that certain sense of positive relations toward other people na kapalapsis sa community. Okay? However, itong definition na to, kaya ako sinama, because it tries to, again, create an understanding that nagkakaroon ng progression sa idea kung ano ang isang community. Okay? So, moving on. According to Hillary, there's nearly 100 definitions of community that were identified and analyzed, of which ang balikan lang natin to, ang pinaka-common denominator component sa kanilang lahat was the word people. And when we talk about people, it's important to understand that, according to Dr. Bartel, that community is a construct, a model. We cannot see a whole community. We cannot touch it, and we cannot directly experience it. Like the words hill or snowflake rather, community may come in many shapes, sizes, colors, and location, no two of which are alike. Yet, when it comes to community, talking about people, dyan papasok yung konsepto na tinatawag natin sociality. Okay? Pag sinabi nating sociality, according to George Simmel, a sociologist, sociality may refer to degree of socialness or levels of social interaction. So, from people, sociality, ang pinaka-focus when it comes to understanding communities or most fundamental element na lahat meron ng isang komunidad ay yung konsepto ng social interaction. So, the idea is, regardless of a community kung saan nyo nakapwesto, kahit anong ginagawa nila, kahit anong function nila, kahit ano yung interest na nakapaloob, kahit positive or negative yung relation nila with one another, kahit yan ay sobrang interest-based, or meron silang particular agenda or action na gustong magawa, it all boils down to the idea na lahat ng mga yun ay mayroon tinatawag na social interaction or sociality. Dahil lahat ng yun ay may social interaction, we can assume that when we talk about community, the most important or aspect or element of community is not necessarily the people alone, but the social interactions of those individuals who are part of that community. That's why, from Filipino context or Filipino standpoint, social interaction is fundamental to community. Okay? One way to understand community is to look at how social interaction progresses. Because in the Philippine context, meron tayong tinatawag na kapwa or pakikipagkapwa. At ito ay yung pinakamagandang explanation kung paano pinapakita yung salamuhan natin sa bawat tao sa ating lipunan. In the Filipino context, this is central to Virgilio Enriquez's work, which is Kapwa. It's uniquely Filipino. So, maniwala ka sa hindi. But meron siyang mga other similar concepts such as nakama in Japan, and or comrade in more English or US context. Nakama is Japanese context. So, moving on. The progression in Enriquez's Kapwa, I hope tandaan nyo pa to sa inyong SSO5, yung context, yung Kapwa, okay, sa Filipino psychology. So, pasadahan ko na lang ito. For you to be part of a community according to Enriquez's concept of Kapwa, may dalawang kategorya. Two main categories. First is ibang tao category, followed by hindi ibang tao. So, sa pagpasok mo sa isang komunidad, let's assume na papasok ka sa classroom for the first time. Ang unang dahil ikaw ay ibang tao pa, ibig sabihin, you're an outsider on that group. Lalo kung halimbawa ikaw ay trans-free. Let's assume. So, pakitungo or transaction, ibig sabihin, you're acting civil with others. Kung halimbawa, pumasok ka sa classroom at kinausap ka nila, or kung ikaw ay makikitungo. Not necessarily makikipag-usap ka, lalo kung ikaw ay nahihiya at baguhan ka kasi ang grupo na rin magkasama. Ang first level is yung pakikitungo. Tutungo kayo. Kasi yung oo kayo, you're acting civil, you're accepting whatever it is that they are saying or they are doing. You're not reacting, you're just accepting. Kaya nakikitungo ka lang eh. Followed by pakikisalamuha. Dito, second level, kung kinausap ka for the second or third time, ikaw ay makikipag-interact. More than pagtungo, magpapakilala ka kung nagpakilala siya or tinanong ka at sasagot ka. Because you're interacting with them. Not necessarily friends na kayo, pero dahil kinakausap ka niya, ikaw ay nakikipag-usap din. Third level is pakikilahok or joining or participating with. Kung halimbawa, dahil kahilera ka nila at nag-uusap-usap sila, ikaw ay may chance ang makilahok din. Not necessarily that you know them, or halimbawa nag-groupings kayo, dahil kayo ginroup, ikaw ay makikilahok. Because that's part of the dynamics of the community or the group that you are part with or in part with. Then, as you progress, ikaw ay makikibagay in conformity or in accord with. Kung halimbawa, yung grupong nasalihan mo ay meron ng nagsisilbing leader at lahat ng mga kasama ay umu-oo, ikaw ay, chances are, makiki-oo ka din. You're conforming. Sumusunod ka dun sa ginagawa ng majority. Then, ito, fifth level, which is borderline ibang tao to hindi ibang tao, meaning from an outsider to being part of that group, nakikisama ka na, you're being along with the group. Hindi ka lang sumusunod, pero you're at the very least trying to voice out. Not necessarily para ikaw yung mag-lead, pero dahil nagsasuggest sila, ikaw yung nagsasuggest na rin. Not wanting anything in return. Dahil nagsasuggest lang sila, gusto mo lang din makisuggest because that's what you're doing by pakikisama. Then, by the time na tumalon ka na sa pakikisama, magiging hindi ibang tao category ka na. Which, the sixth level is pakikipagpalagayang loob or being in rapport, acceptance of that particular group. Which meant na you have that certain sense of understanding. Nagkakaintindihan na kayo na pag sinabi mo na ganito, sinabi nila ganito, maiintindihan mo. At pag nagsalita ka, maiintindihan ka rin nila. Regardless kung tanggapin ba nila yun o hindi, pero maiintindihan nila na yun yung punto mo. Then, pakikisangkot, getting involved. Hindi po yung negatibo, okay? But getting involved with. Hindi ka na lang nagsasalita, tumutulong ka na sa ginagawa ng grupo, sa ginagawa ng klase. And lastly, if you're actually part of the group, hindi ka na ibang tao sa kanila, ikaw ay makikiisa, being one with that group. So, kung ano yung gustong gawin ng nakararami at ito ay tanggap mo, na i-voice out mo yung opinion mo, napakinggan ka nila, nagkaroon ng pagkakaintindihan, you are now being one with that group. What the term community is derived from the Old French word communauté, which comes from the Latin word communitas, sharing the meaning of public spirit or shared in common. In its simplest sense, Kapwa. In the concept of community, people and social, or people and most specifically social interactions. So we can assume that when it comes to community, what's the most important or fundamental part is that there is or are social interactions within a community.